we will be discussing the basics of a tabletop role playing game on this episode of the Woodland Fellowship. Hello, everyone. I'm Woody, and welcome to the Woodland Fellowship, a channel where storytelling and adventure gaming meet. So, what is role playing? Now, you are likely familiar with different RPGs that you can play on a computer or a gaming console, and they come in lots of different styles and genres and gameplay mechanics, whether it be games like Skyrim to Final Fantasy to World of Warcraft to Dragon Age. Now, a question I have for you that you can go ahead and put your answer in the comments here. If you were to take different elements from different games to make the perfect RPG for you, which games would you emulate? Would you take different bits and pieces of the Frankenstein into making your perfect RPG experience? For me, I would want to take the exploration from the Elder Scrolls games, so games like Skyrim and Oblivion and Morrowind. That ability to explore is awesome. I'd want to include the characterization and story interactions from a Dragon Age or Mass Effect style game. I'd want to have a similar thing to the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, those games. That was awesome. And then I'd want to have the magic and combat system from Star Wars Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. So if you put all those together, that would be my prime game that I would play all the time. Now, no such game like that exists on the market that I'm aware of. And regardless of what you would put in your answer into the comments, you can actually achieve at least something similar in a tabletop role playing game. Now, these tabletop versions of RPGs do share lots of similar elements with computerized games, but they're not necessarily going to be the same thing in the same way that a novel is going to be different from a comic book, which is different still from movies, which is different still from television shows, and so on. So it is yet another medium like those others through which we can then relate to one another, that we can share in some unique experiences, and then also have some adventures worth remembering. So, to summarize, tabletop role playing games are interactive and collaborative storytelling games fueled by everyone's collective imagination to solve the problems found within the setting of that story or the problems caused by the characters within it. It's pretty straightforward there. So the next question then is, how does that all work? So in most games, you are going to have between 3 and 5 players, and then one more person called the Game Master or GM, and depending on some systems, a Dungeon Master or DM. And there are lots of different types of games that can have only one player, or have up to a crowd of different players all playing the game. Now, the players usually have control, near complete control of one character, and then you as a player make decisions and interact with that narrative world on their behalf. Pretty straightforward there. But the GM often functions like a referee and a narrator, and then they make decisions on behalf of all non player characters, known as NPCs, as well as determining reactions and consequences within the different settings and environments. And that's so sometimes as you're going through this role playing game aspect, and also depending on your group, it can feel very similar to acting on stage and doing improv, as it will utilize some similar skills to that, but you're not going to have an audience beyond your table. Now, some players will take this to the extreme and we'll experiment with attempting different voices and accents, but that is not required. And as many people don't necessarily feel comfortable with that sort of thing, and that's totally okay. You don't have to do that in order for this to be fun or for this to be considered role playing. And so that is often generally what we're meaning, though, in a role playing game is where your interactions are not necessarily going to be driven by the game mechanics and numbers, but rather it's your own individual improvisation of things that your character is going to say and do, and also determining why your character says and does those things. Just like how an actor would play a particular role in a show regardless of their own personal feelings or preferences in a given situation. And so when you are role playing, you are constantly asking these two questions. What does my character care about in this situation? And then how would they react to solve those issues? Now, there will be times where you will decide that your character will attempt to complete an action that has that possibility to fail. And so, this is where the game portion of a role playing game comes into play, mostly relying on the specific rules of the game system and usually rolling dice to be able to determine that result. And so, these actions will vary from physical actions like attacking someone with a sword to a social action like trying to convince a guard to let you pass, or maybe some mental actions like searching for a tiny key in a chest full of lots of other items. And so the most popular and widely known systems today would be Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, and they both use something called a 20-sided die, or as we call it, a D20. And this is what we use to determine the success or failure of that attempt. And so the GM would determine a number to represent the overall difficulty of the task that the character is attempting. And the GM is not obligated to tell anybody what that number is, although they certainly can. And then the player in question rolls their D20. And then if that GM's number is rolled or higher, then that action succeeds. But if not, then that action fails. And then either way, the story moves on from there as the others can then react to what just happened. And so, based on the rules of the game and the type of character that you are playing, you'll have some tasks that your character is better suited for, and you'll then get a bonus to make such roles easier than another character who is not as skilled in such things. And you would add that bonus to the number rolled on that D20. And that's basically it. So your group discovers problems in the character's worlds, and then you all react and attempt to deal with those problems with a series of tasks that require dice rolls, which might create more problems to deal with, or it might reveal underlying conspiracies and bigger schemes to solve. Ultimately, you are working together with everyone around your table to have fun. And that is the end goal. Now, computerized RPGs are loads of fun, but ultimately you are limited by what the designers made available for you to do. And so you can't explore beyond the borders of Skyrim, for example, even though narratively that part of the world exists. And we can't explore beyond that because the creators never made it possible for us to explore it. They didn't manually or create it or do anything like that. Additionally, you can't do something like casting a lightning spell into a body of water with the intention of affecting all the creatures and nearby creatures in that body of water and touching it, because that's not how that spell was designed to work. But you can potentially do those sorts of things with a tabletop role PEG where you can use different skills and abilities in unique and unexpected ways. And so the beauty of tabletop RPGs is that you can do literally anything. But that can also be really intimidating, just as a blank page can be really exciting as you can draw on it, or you can write, or both, or you can fold it into cool shapes. There are really so many different types of things that you can do with a blank piece of paper, but it might be hard to know what to do. And so your biggest limitation is not going to be what you roll on the dice or anything listed on your character sheet. instead, your biggest limitation is your own imagination. So feel free to explore, experiment, take risks, because you don't know what you're missing out on if you do otherwise. So, we defined role playing. We discussed generally how it works and how imagination is what fuels the fun around the table. So, if you want to learn more, please check out my next video on table etiquette for players, so that way everyone can get the most out of their RPG experience. Now, another thing is that this is a new channel. So, hey, join a community of people who want to learn how to tell better stories, how to run better tabletop games, and grow deeper friendships in the process. See you next time.